I'm about to meet the most powerful woman in Melbourne, someone who believes in the power of linking China and Australia. She's made it her mission to repair and rebuild the relationship between our two countries. And why is that important? Because Melbourne is the historic heart linking Australia and China. I'm talking about Melbourne Lord Mayor Sally Capp. She's just inside here. Let's go meet her.
Nice to see you.
Hey Sally, nice to see you and meet you. Come on in, have a seat.
Thank you.
Yeah, watch the lights.
Wow.
Lord Mayor, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Why is China so important to Melbourne?
Gosh, there are so many reasons why China and Chinese people are important to Melbourne. Of course, economically, culturally, and from a community perspective, our Chinese migrants, Chinese businesses and the Chinese nation provide so much opportunity and benefit.
Well, there's a big Chinese culture in Melbourne. I think it might be the largest in Australia.
It is. 23% of our population have some sort of Chinese heritage, and we're very proud of that. I really acknowledge that since the 1850s and the gold rush, as the city of Melbourne was developing, Chinese people were here right at the start and have been absolutely central to the hard work and the tenacity and the ingenuity that has created the vibrant Melbourne of today.
How did China become one of your priorities?
Wow. Well, I think as a global city, which Melbourne is, those international relationships are absolutely key. They are the platforms from which people and organisations here can leap into new opportunities. And they're vital bridges at times when there might be a crisis of some sort, or there may be some sort of conflict, and you need to have those bridges to be able to work through difficult situations. Australia can't afford not to be outwardly focused. Our population is so small, distributed across an enormous nation. We have so many things of value that we can take into the world. Sometimes if we're just brave enough to think about it, a lot of natural resources, a lot of skills and talents, and that opportunity can only be realised if we're engaged internationally. And of course, China is such a fascinating and valuable market. I mean, just to be commercial for a moment, for Melbourne, in tourism alone, almost 700,000 people annually visiting. Victoria, $3 billion in economic value. We have more, or almost 70,000 international students here that contribute to it being the largest export for Victoria, third largest for Australia.
Let me just drill down on a couple of those things you just mentioned, because China is Victoria's largest two-way trading partner. That's valued at around $39 billion. That's a lot of money. It's the top-ranked destination for Australian exports. That's valued at around $6.4 billion. So it really is important when we are trying to bring money into this country.
It's bringing economic value into the country, and it's, as you said, it's a two-way street. I'm a real believer in mutual benefit because that underpins those long-term relationships. And we don't just want to be transactional. We actually want to be building relationships and opportunities for the long term. We want to know that everything we're doing today adds value into what organisations could be doing into the future as well. I think that's a big role for government to play. From our perspective, the growth that is possible is highly beneficial. For some organisations here, China is their only market at the moment. And I think the pandemic certainly highlighted for lots of businesses that they need to have diversity and they need to think broadly as they're looking at their strategies. But regardless, China remains central to so many business strategies for organisations here in Melbourne, and rightly so. there is a lot of opportunity there. It's one of the biggest markets in the world economically. We're in the same time zone. We share so many cultural, language and business knowledge and experience. And from our perspective, we should continue to build on that. I think of a trip I did down the Haihe River in Tianjin, where I could see the evidence of the collaboration that we have done. We had teams of people from the City of Melbourne go there to look at the redevelopment along the river, similar to what we have done here in Melbourne over the last 2 decades. It's been extraordinary to see that transformation and the success of that transformation. I think on steroids, it's absolutely wonderful to see. And same here, the learning that we have, particularly around things like Smart City. I did go to the 3rd World Intelligence Congress that was held in Tianjin in 2019. I had the opportunity to speak, but it is a lot for us about the learning as well and what we can bring back here and the way that we use technology to really drive a more efficient and more successful city.
You are very much into this Clean City initiative. I was riding around earlier today coming here on one of those e-scooters that you can hire around the place. But you're sharing that kind of knowledge with China as well as they try to get clean.
Yes, and I think it's great the way that cities can inspire each other to new levels of achievement. Transport, buildings, green open spaces, the way that we clean cities, the materials that are used and authorised, all of these sorts of things make a massive difference. And then adaptation. So increasingly a focus on adaptation. And for us, that is about how we create more green canopy cover in the city. How do we cool cities? Cities are very hot places, as you may know, in every sense of the word.
Except when Melbourne gets a few wind tunnels.
There are those moments, but overall cities are hot places to be. So that sharing, but also that real motivation to excel. And I'm just amazed at what can be achieved in Chinese cities. The generosity of the sharing of that ingenuity and innovation, but also really pleased that we can share so much of what we've been doing here as one of the world's most livable cities.
Yes. And you want to get back to number 1?
We do. We are striving. We're almost back there, which is incredible.
Hot days and warm nights are better with you. Let's run this together. Let's live for right now. We're gonna stay up till morning light, and it gives me life. Take me back to the place where we come alive.
You talk about drive, but then I see the drive from you and the initiatives that you have. And it was interesting when I was reading up and you bring it all back to the health scare that you had, I think almost 20 years ago when you were dealing, I hope you don't mind me saying, with breast cancer, and how going through that process and coming through that really changed your attitude a bit.
It did. It changed my priorities very much, and it's been central to my career since then. I'm somebody that can be highly motivated around commercial targets, don't get me wrong.
Well, hang on, weren't you the executive director of KPMG and things like that?
Yes,
like,
I've been in banking and I've been in private equity, and I've listed my own company on the stock exchange. So I have that in my history and certainly in my DNA. But going through a time of prioritising health really helped me reorient what my personal priorities were, and that was to really be more closely connected to my community, to be more purposeful in what I was doing, and to feel that I was really making a contribution to my city those things have been central, including taking a role overseas representing the Victorian government in Europe and Israel. Those sorts of roles really came from me reorienting in that way.
I just find it fascinating because you obviously have that first moment of fear when you first find out. Then what does the future hold? You have that battle. I'm just intrigued about that point where you go, I'm changing my life, because I think people go through traumatic events and they think they're going to change, but they end up in that pattern of doing the same thing.
Yes.
You really did change.
I did. Yes, I changed quite significantly. For me, I realised there's not a moment to spare. And I think often we get into a routine in our lives which is very enjoyable and reap a lot of rewards, but they're not necessarily as fulfilling as you might want or might expect. And for me, this was a turning point to say, I don't have a moment to spare and I've really got to make every minute count for what's important to me. And from that perspective, it was really that broader focus on how do I get more involved in agendas that have a wider benefit for our city and community.
Well, it's interesting you've spoken about the fact that even when our relationship federally was rocky with China, you still had those relationships with the sister city and all the people that you're dealing with and the business communities over there. What happens if we don't have a good relationship with China?
I just don't think it's an option. You know, I think we need to have good, productive relationships, even when we don't agree on things. And in fact, during very difficult federal political issues, we are encouraged and supported to maintain the constructive relationships that exist, recognising the long history that Chinese migrants have here in our city, the importance of international students, and with an eye to the future. So I'm very conscious of the positive role that we can play in those issues.
You talked about culture and the Chinese culture here. Is there a better example than Barry Pang?
Barry Pang is something of a Melbourne legend, as is his wife Anne. Born to Chinese immigrant parents and raised in Melbourne, Barry pioneered Kung Fu in Australia. Bruce Lee is a relation. A self-made man, Barry is the first Australian of Chinese descent to win the prestigious Melbourne Cup horse race.
Describe this moment, Barry.
Oh, I can't really, it's just, I'm pinching myself.
But his biggest win was marrying Anne, a successful businesswoman and the creator of Kung Fu self-defense for women.
No one should have to learn how to defend themselves because there shouldn't be any gender-based violence in this world.
To top it off, their son Chris is a rising Hollywood actor with starring credits in Charlie's Angels and Crazy Rich Asians. Indeed, it was something of an effort to track the Pangs down. We found them in Las Vegas on a visit to Chris, who directed the shots as I interviewed them.
Barry and Anne, welcome.
Well, it's our pleasure. Thank you for having us on the show.
Barry, let's start with you, because what you were doing with your Kung Fu in Australia is very impressive. I mean, those videos scare the bejesus out of me. You look very mild and then you just go wham and you're throwing people around. I love them to death. But what I'm more impressed with is that you are now trying to build a cultural understanding between Australia and Chinese communities.
Yes, because basically we want to contribute something to the Australian culture, and we've been taking a lot out of the Australian culture with the sports we're involved in Australia, the Australian rules football and of course horse racing. But on the other hand, we'd like a bit of an exchange where we can add some Chinese sports to the Australian sports scene, and martial arts is obviously the ideal one, and nothing better to come out of China than Kung Fu because of the popularity of Bruce Lee and Yip Man throughout the world. So it's an instant product that everyone recognises and something identified with China. So it's great to have an exchange where we can enrich the Australian culture with some martial arts, and we can take in the Australian sports, or the Western sports like football, cricket, horse racing, tennis, golf, which is really getting popular in China as well.
That's a true exchange at its best, isn't it?
It really is. It's fantastic. And Barry, you mentioned Bruce Lee. Are we allowed to mention that he's a relative of yours?
Yeah, he's on my mother's side. My grandfather and his grandfather were brothers, and we're from the on my mum's side, same village in Canton called Sunda. So I think Bruce Lee's father, Li Huichen, lived a couple of doors down from my mother when they were both in China many, many moons ago.
Now, Barry, you're a little bit concerned because I believe you think Chinese parents are turning away from Kung Fu at the moment. Why is that?
I think the whole Chinese attitude towards education is that you've got to be into the sciences, into medicine and law, rather than like in the Western world where all the stars are sportsmen, movie stars, pop singers. So it's a bit difficult for the Chinese migrants to adapt to that because the way they've brought up was the education expertise was the key to their success, whereas in the Western world, someone can be a superstar overnight, like a Michael Jordan, and the parents can't understand that, which does put a lot of pressure on children, which we've tried to convince as many people as possible. If we're living in Australia, you live the Australian way, but you can enhance it by adding some Chinese culture as well. So what we try to say is try to get the best of both worlds.
Well, it's interesting you bring up movie stars because, Anne, you've had to deal with the fact your son, Chris, has gone on to find wood in Crazy Rich Asians. How have you found that experience?
I miss him so much, but I'm so proud of him at the same time that he has gone on so well from Tomorrow When the War Began in 2010
yes.
to making it in Hollywood as a spokesperson as well for diversity and inclusiveness in Hollywood. I'm so proud that he could be involved in such a fantastic movie from an entertaining point of view and also from a diversity point of view.
Growing up as an Asian kid was kind of tough. I never saw myself really represented in the media, and not being validated through pop culture and seeing your image represented. It's tough, especially as a teenager in your formative years. It can be very damaging. And so I am particularly honoured today to receive this award and honoured to receive it from GQ Australia. On behalf of teenage me and all the ethnically diverse kids growing up in Australia.
And it's groundbreaking.
Yes.
It was the first all-Asian cast for 25 years, and it's been the biggest rom-com in the last 10 years, which is pretty amazing for an all-Asian cast. So we're very proud of him, and like I say to everyone now, I'm known as Chris Pang's dad.
And I'm Chris Pang's mum.
And I will say you sound very, very proud, as well you should. And what I love, and I'm going to reveal something here, he's still humble. He's actually the cameraman today, helping us do this video with you in Las Vegas. So he's not too big for his boots just yet, is he?
He loves making things. He loves doing things well, as you would have noticed, Rob, that he wants everything, perfect before it actually goes on air. So, he loves making things and he loves creating things.
And he is a very humble person as well. I think that's probably one of the values that we have in the family. Try to embrace that humbleness and nurture that, and also respect. He's very respectful as well.
I used to think that love was just a word, and that was more than enough. Didn't think about tomorrow, lived just for today. But then you showed me love. Then the world kept spinning around, and my feet can't touch the ground.
So how does a boy from a poor school trying to ride the two cultures end up winning the Melbourne Cup?
Well, I think it inspired me. It was always me against my parents, more so my mum, because my dad was pretty much, didn't say much like a lot of Asian parents, but mother, was really onto me on everything. And in fact, I used to get smacked 3 times a day with the feather duster, the cane, and
I've been there, Barry. I understand that one.
The old days, parents get locked up these days for doing that, but in the old days, that was very common practice, and it just made me more determined to achieve those things that wasn't likely. And obviously, as part of my education at school, my friends all played those sports. They all were involved in all the Aussie things. So you had to be involved, because back in those days, there's only one other Chinese kid in our school, and that was my brother. So unlike now, where there are a lot of Asian migrants here, but back in my day, if you didn't play football and cricket, you played nothing. And you don't belong to any, you wouldn't have any friends there. You don't belong to any groups and that, because that's what everyone else did. So you had to either fall in or fall out.
And then you actually met Barry taking one of his classes.
Yes, I started training when I was very young at Barry's Kung Fu school, and that's something that I'm very, very passionate about. I founded my own system of women's self-defense in 1990, and I realized a lot of women would love to learn martial arts, but time restraints or for any reason they cannot do it for a long period of time. But they do want to empower themselves, and they are concerned about their own safety. So I put together a self-defense program that combines the mental and the physical. So mental would incorporate awareness strategies, situational awareness, empowerment strategies, and so on. And the physical would be techniques that would be simple, practical to use, that women can learn straight away within a short course and be able to defend themselves. So I combine the mental and the physical together, which in Chinese culture you would say it's the yin and the yang together. And I put, and I've been teaching at universities, schools. So it's something that the Australian culture, the Australian society has really embraced and supported, and combining the Kung Fu from the East and the evidence, statistics from the West, and the learning system from the West. And then we can take it back to China and benefit those women in terms of improving their personal safety issues and empower the women, half of China's population there.
It's a really fascinating note to end on, to be honest. Barry and Anne, thank you for joining us from Las Vegas, and thank you to your son Chris for being the videographer extraordinaire. Appreciate your time and good luck with everything in the future.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
Rob. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, a real pleasure. Thanks for having us. Thanks for the show.
Which brings us back to Sally Capp. She recently announced that this will be her last term in office as Melbourne's mayor.
With her husband and a son by her side, the Lord Mayor announced she'll stand down.
It's a very emotional day. I've managed to get this far without tears.
Sally steps down in October, proud of her many achievements, including the strengthening of ties between Australia and China.
What is your final message when it comes to China-Australia beyond 2030?
Well, China and Australia beyond 2030 will remain integrally intertwined in each other's cultures and economy. I'm very confident of that. I feel strongly that the investments that we've made in each other over more than 100 years are going to be a strong basis for the future. I've no doubt that there will continue to be things that we don't agree on, but being able to have those fierce conversations, move through them and still maintain strong relationships focused on the things we have in common, the things that we want to do together and the ways that we can drive mutual benefit for each other. I think those really are the mainstays and will continue to drive success for the two nations together into the future. Let's not forget that the people-to-people connections, the business-to-business connections, the city-to-city connections remain very strong and we'll be here to create those bonds or strengthen those bonds into the future.
Lord Mayor, thank you for your time.
Thank you.